So before we even start modeling anything, we want to set up our image references. We want to have a side view and a front view of our character to start with. So we're going to map an image file onto some polygon planes. So let's go to our polygons tab, and in the shelf here, let's go to our polygon plane. We'll just click on that, and it gives us a polygon plane right at the origin. So we're just going to scale that right up, bring it up above the grid. I have my subdivision set to 10, but we'll just go into the channel box here and change this to 1. I think starting in Maya 2015 they started with one-sided polygons, but you can change that. Like one side's this gray shader and one side's black. So I'm going to set this to -90, rotate Z, just so we have the gray side. So we'll just bring that over to the X side of the grid, and we'll create another one. Type in 90, or you can just type in 90 right off the bat, and we're just going to roughly place it. We'll just map my image onto one of them for now. You can model your own character if you have your own character design. This is the one that is provided. So we have a side view, a 3/4 view, and a front view. The 3/4 view is really just to look at for reference as we're modeling, but the side view and the front view, we're going to use those pretty closely for reference and actually model right along the edges here and try and get it as close as possible. And then the 3/4 view, we're really just going to compare our model to the 3/4 view drawing just to make sure it has the same kind of appeal and charm as this drawing does. So this is the actual PNG. This is the image I actually took with my phone of the drawing that I did in my sketchbook. So we're just going to bring that to the side for a minute. We have to go to Windows and open up our Hypershade. So under Rendering Editors, we'll go to Hypershade, and you'll see this window open up. So down at the bottom of the Hypershade here, let's just scroll down and find Lambert. We're just going to click on that, and you'll see Lambert 2 appears. So I'm just going to right click and rename that. Since this one's on the X side of the grid, we're going to name that reference side. So on the right side of the Hypershade, these are our attributes for the shader. Under color, you just want to hit this checkerboard here, and that'll bring up this new window to create a new render node. And just go to File. Once you click that, you'll notice the attributes change on the side here, and where it says image name, you just want to hit this folder. Now we can browse for our reference image. So if you downloaded the one from our site, if you downloaded this image, you can just navigate to wherever you save that to, or if you've created your own, just navigate to the image that you want to use. So this is where I've saved mine, and I'm just going to select it and hit open. Alright, so now you can see reference side actually has an image on it. You can select it, middle mouse button, drag it over to the object and just release, or you can select the object and right mouse button over the shader and go to Assign Material to Selection. Either way does the same thing. So we can't see it yet. We have to hit 6 on our keyboard to display textures. It's obviously sideways and it's squashed, so let's fix that. I'm just going to minimize this for a minute. Alright, to quickly fix the rotation, we'll just rotate this 90 degrees. We'll just go up here and type 90 right in the Rotate Y attribute. Let's just hit spacebar to go to our orthographic views. So to center the selection in all the orthographic views, we'll hit Shift A, and it'll just center everything. And we'll have to hit 6 on our keyboard if you want to see the texture. But you can right click on any one of these panels to activate the panel, and just press 6. So right now we're just going to look in the side view, and I'll just spacebar to full screen that. I'm just going to compare the actual PNG file to the image we mapped onto this plane. You can see this one's sort of squashed. It's not the right resolution. So a quick way to fix this, go into the folder where your image is saved, and if you look at the dimensions, you should see it at the bottom here, but you can right click on it as well and go to the properties. Under details, you can see the dimensions here as well if you don't see it at the bottom. So mine's 3528 by 2846. What we want to do is affect the scale X and the scale Y to be the same proportions as our image. Now you can do this by UV mapping, but I don't want to get into the UV mapping too much just to accomplish this. This is a quick and easy way to get the proportions right. The first number is your X, and the second number is your Z. That's the width and height. So we're just going to divide 3528. So you can see here our scale X is 18.795. So I want to get it somewhere around that number within 10. So I just divided 3528 by 120, and it gave me 29.4. Okay, so we're going to do the other number now. And the other number is the height, and that's going to be our scale Z. For the height is 2846, and we're just going to divide it by the exact same number. We're going to divide it by 120, same as the other number. So we get 23.7. So we'll just type that in. So if we take a look at it now, I'll just bring my image beside it. I'm just going to go to display. We're going to turn the grid off just for a minute so we can see it better. So if I take a look at it now, you can see I'm just looking at the side view heads. You can see the proportions are exactly the same. It's a quick way to get the polygon plane to be the same proportions as your image. Alright, so let's go back into our perspective view. Turn the grid back on. Alright, so I'm just going to bring that up a little bit. I just want to have the plane sitting on top of the grid. You can see this thicker line here is the top of the grid. So I can see here in the translate Y it's almost 12, so we'll just punch in 12 to make it an even number. Alright, so I want to have this plane the exact same size because we're going to map this image onto the other plane as well. So for the translate Y, I have this at 12, so let's bring it to 12. Scale X is 29.4, so let's just type that in. And we'll just match these up. So the scale Z is 23.7. These are the exact same size and the exact same height. So let's go back into our hypergraph for a minute. And we're just going to do the same thing we did earlier. We're going to create a new Lambert for the other polygon. Choose a new Lambert. We'll click on that. Lambert 3, we're going to rename that to reference. We'll go ref underscore front. So make sure that one's selected. Go to the side here in the attribute editor under color. Hit that little checkerboard, and we'll create a new render node, a file where it says image name. Click on the yellow folder to browse. I'm just going to browse for that same image. Select it, hit open, and now we have that on the reference front. Middle mouse button, drag that over to the image. I want to get the side view right in the center here on this one, and we want to get the front view right in the center on this image. I'm actually going to close up my Hypershade. I don't need that anymore. And let's open up the UV texture editor. So we'll go to Windows, UV editor. Alright, so now we can see our image for the plane that we have selected. So right click and go to UV, and they're basically just texture coordinates. So if you select one and move it, you can see when you move it here, you can see it changes in the view panel there. So we're just going to Control Z that. So what I want to do is just get the side view in the center. So let's go to our side view for a minute. For our grid, you have these thick center lines. So this is the floor, and this divides virtual space right in the middle. So I want to get the side view lined up with the middle here. So just drag a box over all 4 UV points and just slide it over. So let's get the side view right in the middle. Right, so that's good for that one. Let's go to the front view. So select that one, just drag a box over. As soon as you select it, it'll automatically load into the UV editor. And then we can slide that one. Let's go to the front view here for a moment. So we're going to get in real close. I want to make sure, because when we start modeling the head, we want to make sure that we're not modeling it lopsided like this. We want to make sure that the nose runs right down the center. So I'm just looking at the space between the eyes and the nose here. It's a hand drawing, so it's not going to be perfectly precise. We'll just get it as close as possible for now. If you're having trouble with it, just zoom in really close to the UV editor. Now one thing that's really off, where we have the center divider where the x-axis is here, you can see that the feet are not centered at all. So what we can do to just easily correct that, drag a box over the 2 bottom UV points, and you can slide it like this. So we'll just fix that and just get the feet generally in the middle there. So we're just going to close up the texture editor now. That's all we really needed to do in there. Alright, so spacebar out of that, and now we're pretty much set to start modeling. I'm just going to hit F8 to get out of our component mode here. And we can move that as far back and translate X as we want, and you can see it doesn't affect the size in the side view. We're going to be orbiting around the object, and we don't want these images to block our view, so we can actually move these back. So I'll move them the same distance away. Let's go -60 on this one. -60. Alright, so a great approach to modeling is called box modeling. It's called box modeling because we start with a box or a cube, a polygon cube. So let's just create the cube under the Polygons tab, and you can press F on your keyboard to focus in on it. Alright, so let's scale that up, and let's use our reference. We'll just scale that up and bring it up in Y. So let's go to our side view for a minute, and let's just bring it up to where our character's head is. And just translate it and scale it approximately to the size of the character's head. Alright, so right now we're at a smooth level of 1. Again, 1, 2, and 3 are our 3 different smooth levels. So this is just a preview of what it's going to look like once we actually finish the model and smooth it. We'll be working with this outer cage here, the low poly model, that we can actually see through. So it's great that we can preview the finished product while we're working on our model. Alright, so with your box selected, let's go to the channel box. Under inputs, we see our polycube 1. And we just want to give it 1 subdivision level right down the middle. So we'll go to the subdivision's width, just type in 2 here, or you can middle mouse button drag so we have a loop of edges all the way around it. So right click and let's go to face. automatically it switches to component mode. So we want to select all the faces on one side of it. It doesn't really matter which side you select, and we're just going to delete those. Just hit delete on your keyboard. So let's go back to object mode. We'll hit F8, and we're going to duplicate this. We're going to make an instance copy, and we'll do it this way so that we only have to work on one side of the face, and the other side will automatically update. With the cube selected, we'll go to Edit. We'll go to Duplicate Special, Option Box. Under Geometry Type, this should automatically be on Copy, but you want to change this to Instance, and that'll give us the functionality of just working on one side while the other side updates. So under Scale, we're going to hit -1, and it'll actually give us a flipped version of what we have here. So we'll just change this to -1 and hit Apply. So now if we right click on this one and we go to Vertex, just to test it, if we select this and hit W on our keyboard for the Translate tool, and we just move this around, you'll see it automatically does the same thing on both sides. Alright, so if your new duplicate is black, you want to go to Lighting, make sure that you're on Use Default Lighting, and make sure that two-sided lighting is not checked. Let's open up our modeling toolkit. There's one more tool that we're going to be using quite a bit, and it's not included in the modeling toolkit, and it's under Mesh Tools, and it's the Insert Edgeloop tool. So let's execute that right now. We'll turn that on. We want to put one right near the middle, and that's going to be our seam. We're going to put that there to avoid having a seam down the middle of the character's face and body. We want to make sure that we keep them completely even. So if I go to the side view, okay, so if I push these back, we'll just hit F8 to go back to object mode for a minute. So you can see that there's this seam down the middle. So we want to avoid that. And by putting that extra edge loop in there, it will help us to avoid having any kind of a seam. So I'm just going to undo that for a minute. We'll hit 2, get back to our cage. So you want to make sure that these always stay even with each other. Before we go any further, I just want to put these on a layer. So let's go back to our channel box for a minute. And I'm just going to select both of these planes. If you hit this little button, it'll create layer from selected. So if you hit V, we can turn the visibility off if we want to just hide it for a little bit. If we change this to R, so say for example, if we want to make selections on here, if I want to make a selection on the head, we won't select the reference object by accident. Alright, so let's go back to our mesh tools. We can go to Insert Edge Loop tool again, or have a look in the toolbar and you'll see that it actually saves the last tool that you used. So it's already here, we can just click it here. You can go to any one of your orthographic views and press F to focus in on it. Alright, so let's create one more edge loop. And I'll right click and go to Vertex. Alright, so we want to get this more into a rounded shape. We're going to scale this down, but you want to make sure you don't scale it in X, it's going to detach. You can scale it in Z and Y. Again, you want to make sure you keep these center loops together. If you use the middle scale option, it's going to detach or collapse in on itself. So we just want to get it close to what his head width is going to be over here. Again, we want to make sure it's really important that we keep these edge loops together. So we'll just roughen the basic shape. So feel free, if you want at this point, feel free to change your layout. You can see this one here has a 3 view panel layout. So we can click on that one and we can just change these panels. I can change this to perspective so that we can toggle around and work in here. Hit 6 on the keyboard to see the textures. And then this panel we can change to, so you don't really need the top view, so we can just change it to, go to orthographic, we can change that to front. And this one we can change to, under panels, orthographic, we can change that to side. Those are the only 2 views we really need, and this is probably a really good layout for modeling. So let's just go to the back of the head here, and we're going to just move a couple of vertices around to make space to rough in his neck. We just want to get that area pinched in as small as possible. He's got a pretty narrow neck, so we're just going to keep it like that for now. We're going to right click, go to our faces, and we'll select these 3 faces. And we're going to do an extrusion. So let's go back to our modeling toolkit and we'll hit extrude. I don't want to extrude it this way because it's going to bring my faces out and away from each other. I want to actually use the world orientation, so I'll hit this button here and I just want to extrude it straight down. And I'm looking at my reference here. I just want to get it sort of roughly on the right angle. And I'll hit extrude again. Just bring it out a little bit so we have a bit of a hard edge. These 2 extrusions are independent of each other. There's actually faces on the inside which we have to delete. Just try and get in there and select the faces that are on the inside. And you want to delete that. So I'm just going to go to wireframe and make sure that there's actually no faces on the inside. So we should be good here. Okay, so we have our neck roughed in. Now I'm going to go through and just rough in the head shape. Then we'll start roughing in the nose and eye areas. So just using vertex, edges, and faces just to move and shift things around, making sure that we don't cause a seam. So if you're going to move anything in the middle, you always want to make sure that you don't just select one of these. You select actually both of these and move them together. So I'm just going to go to Mesh Tools and insert Edgeloop tool. I'm going to insert some edge loops. So if you make a mistake, say for example, if you select this whole ring of vertices and you decided to scale it and you grabbed all of it at the same time, or both sides, and if you used the world scale and did something like this and you want to fix it, easy way to do that is just to grab one of the vertexes on the seam. You can go right to your front view and focus in on it. You can activate your snap to grid and then your move tool, and you can just snap it right to the center just to close up that gap. Alright, so I'm going to put my head on a layer just so I can see, I can shut it off sometimes and see the drawing behind it. We'll just select both sides and we'll hit this little button here in the layer area. And you'll see it creates layer 2. And let's go add selected objects. Now we can shut that off just to see the drawing underneath it. And actually I think I'll name these. If you double click on the layer 2 here, we can rename this. And we'll just call it head for now just so we know which is which. Save. So you're constantly toggling around and looking at these edge loops and making sure things look rounded, that the edge flow makes sense. So edge flow is basically just the path that the edges take, making sure that things aren't bungled up like this, aren't all jagged. You want to make sure that the edge flow is rounded around the base of the neck. And when we get to doing the facial features, it becomes even more important for rigging considerations in regards to how the face creases for facial expressions. Alright, so we're just going to do a pass on the side view of the head. Just go through and do the front view and side view pass. So we have the basic head shape. Now we can move in and start doing some of the facial features. Alright, so we're going to start blocking in some of the facial features now. So we're going to go to a new tool now. It's called the multi-cut tool. It allows us to split polygons in specific areas where we want to. Instead of adding an entire edge loop around the entire head or model, we're just going to split some of the specific polygons. Before we do that, sometimes it's nice to be able to see the reference. So let's actually select our reference in the background here, and I'm just going to duplicate it. You can hold down Control and press D on your keyboard to duplicate it. I'm just going to move it out and over a little bit, just so I can see the reference of the head beside the model. That's helpful sometimes when we're blocking in some of the facial features. Let's go to our modeling toolkit, and we're going to select the multi-cut tool. Alright, so let's go into our head. I'm going to block in the concave area for the eyes. doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to refine it later, but we want to get it as close as possible right off the bat. We're just going to click in the center on the edge. We just want to get it close to somewhere where the top of the brows are. Basically, as soon as you click on an edge, it creates a vertex, and when you click on the next edge, it creates another vertex and a new edge. When you hit enter, it executes that. So I'm just going to undo that somewhere over here, and then we'll create our next one and just keep clicking on the edges. We want to form it something like this, and we can end it right about there, and we can just hit enter on our keyboard just to lock that in. So I'm just going to hit my selection tool to deactivate that tool. Now, we don't want to have 5-sided polygons like this. So we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't want to have 5-sided polygons and 3-sided polygons. It's not good for when we texture the character later on. But for now, we're just going to keep it like that, and we'll delete these edges or collapse them later. So, right, so I'm going to go to edges, and we're just going to collapse the eye area in. I think at this point I'm going to copy the side reference as well. So we'll go back to object mode, and we'll just Control D and move it over a little bit. Alright, so now we'll start splitting some polygons to shape the mouth area. We're just using the multi-cut tool to split these polygons and make edges that go around in a circle around the mouth. And we call that edge flow. We want to keep edge flow in mind and rigging in mind, because when we start to rig this character for facial expressions, we want the creases in the face to work properly with how people's faces actually crease. So we want to have the edges around the mouth in a circular pattern as we continue to model. So another technique that we use sometimes is just collapsing edges. Say we've split some of the polygons and we have a situation where we have a three-sided polygon and we want to get rid of it. We can simply just collapse that edge just by selecting the edge, going to Edit Mesh, and Collapse. Now I'm going to split these polygons here just to flesh out the jaw a little bit better, and also too it'll fix this 5-sided polygon. So now we have 2 4-sided polygons here. We just want to make sure that the edge flow is rounded around the side of the head and the top of the head. That edge loop will help to flesh out the jaw and cheek areas. Alright, so let's use the multi-cut tool to create one of the eye sockets. We'll just do a diamond shape in this area here. Then we're just going to select these edges and delete them. It's always a good idea to go to wireframe and make sure you didn't select any other edges behind the head. We're just going to hit delete on our keyboard. So now we're going to block in the area for the nose. Now that I have all these edges in, I'm going to go around and use my move tool. Just move some of the vertices around to get the general shape of the eyebrow ridge in this whole area here. So I just put these 2 edges in here just to fix that structure. Now we have a 4-sided polygon here, and we don't have the edges going all the way around the back of the head. So now they have this basic structure in for the nose. We can just pull these vertices out. Alright, so now we're going to just use the multi-cut tool to block in the mouth a little bit. Starting at the center and just going around. We're going to go right around that corner there, and we're just going to collapse those edges later. So I'm just going to delete those edges, get rid of these edges in the middle as well. Sometimes when you delete edges, you're left with a vertex. You want to delete those. Just select them and delete. You see I got a few more here. We want to delete those. So deleted edges there earlier. Alright, so now we're going to start creating the oral cavity. Once we have this shaped in the way we like it, just want to select these faces. You only have to do it on one side, and then we're going to go to extrude. And we're going to extrude that. I don't want to use the normals for the face. We're just going to hit this little button here to get the world orientation for the manipulator. And we're just going to push that right in. So I'll go in a little bit. We'll hit extrude again. And then we'll extrude it in further. And for now, I'm just going to bring that in to about there. I'm not going to create the entire oral cavity now. And remember, whenever you extrude using an instance copy like this, it gives you two sides. We have to delete the face in the middle. And we did two extrusions there, so there's another face that we have to delete. You want to delete that face. So now we have a little bit of an oral cavity happening there. Okay, so we'll leave it like that for now. We'll be making adjustments to that oral cavity later. Adding this edge loop is going to really allow us to shape out the jaw area. Now that you have a good grasp on all the tools and functions that you need for modeling the head is a time-consuming process, so we're just going to speed through the rest of the process here, and I'll make comments along the way as well. It's important to remember edge flow. You want nice rounded edges all the way around the mouth area for facial expressions and creases. And I'm using the multi-cut tool to add more edges around the mouth. Not only do you want them to be rounded around the mouth area, but you want there to be a lot of edges, or anywhere else where there's going to be a lot of creasing and bending. You'll notice that every time I add in extra edge loops, I go through and just tweak out the area and form it even further. And I'll continuously go through and just touch areas here and there on the face and pull out vertices and faces to round out certain areas and just make little tweaks here and there. The Lasso tool works really well if you want to select a group of vertices to move larger areas around. And it's often good to do that in the side view so that you don't select unwanted vertices. Now I'm going to start adding some more edges around the nose area so I can construct an area to pull the nostrils out and start to form the nostrils. Oftentimes you'll add edges and then delete them if they don't work out. Just make sure that if you delete the edges, you delete any vertices that are left behind as well. It may take a bit of playing around with it to make sure that you're inserting edges in the right areas and not creating 3 or 5-sided polygons. You want to make sure that all the faces are 4-sided. So I added in a whole bunch of new edges around the nose area. So I'm just going to go through and pull vertices and faces out to tweak that area and shape it and form it some more. So I created a circular area underneath the nose to extrude some faces up for the nostrils. So here I'm just doing an extrusion for the eye sockets, and then I just scaled the new face down a little bit, and then hit extrude again and brought it into the head. And then we just deleted the inside of the eye socket. We don't need those faces on the inside. So I'm going to continue to go around the mouth and add in more edges around the mouth to get nice creases for the facial expressions. Even though you're not supposed to create 3 or 5-sided faces or polygons, sometimes you have to do it temporarily and then just collapse the edge after. So don't be afraid to go through and just get the edge loops in that you need, and then go back after and collapse certain edges where you might have a 3 or 5-sided polygon. Occasionally it's good to hit 3 on your keyboard to go into the max smoothing level. Then it's easier to see and decide on areas where you need to make further changes. So I'm just going through and finessing the nostril area, and I'm going to collapse an edge here and just create a new edge loop. For our smile creases, it's good to have the edge loop connect to the top of the nostril and then come around the mouth that way, just so that we can get some natural deformations when we go to rig the character's face. So now we're going to start rigging the eyeballs. You just want to go to the polygon shelf and create a polygon sphere. And then just bring it up into the character's eye socket. Just size it so that it fits in the eye socket nicely. And then you can go ahead and move some of the vertices around the eye socket so that it fits the eyeball a little nicer. Then I'm just going to hide visibility on the head. We'll duplicate the sphere twice so that we have 3 spheres. The original one will be the eyeball, so we're going to delete all the faces on the second sphere, except for maybe about 3 or 4 rings at the pole. On the third sphere, we're going to delete a larger area and just keep a small amount of faces for the pupil. Center the pivot on those and clear the history. Then we'll just flip the iris around and then drag the pupil onto it. And just push it in. The geometry can intersect a little bit. And then push the entire thing back into the eyeball. And then we'll create 3 new shaders, one for the eyeball, which we'll just color white, and you can use a Fong shader for that so it has a nice highlight on it. We actually need to create one more shader for the transparency on the faces over the iris. So I selected the faces on the eyeball geometry that are directly over the iris. Then apply a Lambert to those faces and turn down the transparency on this Lambert all the way. This way we can see the iris and still get nice highlights over it. For the iris and the pupil, you can just use a Lambert shader. We'll apply the shader to the pupil and color it black. Apply the iris shader to the iris, and for now we'll just give it a color. I'll just color it green for now. If you're having an issue where you can't see your colors, you just have to go to your panel menu under lighting and just uncheck two-sided lighting. Now if we have a look in our hypergraph, you can see the three nodes that we have for the eyeball, iris, and the pupil. So we're just going to group those together and then rename them appropriately. You can resize the iris and the pupil just to make it look a little more appealing. And then you can duplicate the entire eyeball group for the other side and then rename those appropriately. So now I'm going to select a bunch of faces around the top of the eye, and we'll use the extrude function to extrude the eyelids out. After you extrude the eyelids, it's nice to go to the corner and just collapse some of the edges, so you get a nice smooth corner. Then we'll move the vertices around to form it around the eyeball, and we'll do another extrusion. And then we'll repeat the process. We'll just collapse some of the edges at the corner, just so you get a nice smooth corner, and then continue to form the eyelid around the eyeball. Make sure it's nice and tight around the eyeball, just so you don't have any major gaps. And then continue to form the eyelid so it's nice and rounded. Go into smooth mode, take a look at it, see if there's any areas that you need to refine. For the ears, you only have to do one side, obviously, because we're working with an instance copy. But we're just going to basically do an extrusion on the side of the head there. You might need to move a few vertices around to get a face that's a good shape to extrude from. We'll extrude the ear straight out, and then continuously repeat the same process we've been doing, using the multi-cut tool to add additional edges so that we can continue to form the ear. You basically want to create a bunch of edges on the front of the ear to form the shape of the ear, and then you can extrude the faces in, and then just continue to split polygons and move vertices around until you're happy with it. Then at the very end, I'm going to select the entire ear and just make sure it's placed properly according to our reference, and just make some final small tweaks and revisions to it. Alright, so that's it for our head model. Next we'll be modeling the body.